And they had a raffle. And it came out that Shimon Gamliel would be killed first. And they took him, Shimon Gamliel, and they put his head down and chopped off his head, Rahman al-Islan. And they were about to kill Bishmal. And Bishmal said, wait, can I at least cry for the Gadol Adar who died? And he picked up his head. And he put his eyes on his eyes, his nose on his nose, his mouth on his mouth. And he cried and he cried. And he says, Rebbe, why should such a tzaddik have to be punished? But then he realized this was a punishment for selling Yosef to Mitzrayim. You think just because a guy didn't get punished when he does Aveira, how does he know Hashem's not going to punish him years later? It turns out, when people saw how pretty he was, the daughter of the Caesar, of the emperor, said to her father, please, can I ask you a favor? He says, I know what you want. You want me to save the life of Yishmael? He said, yes, he's so handsome. I want you to leave him around just so I can look at him. I love to look at handsome people. So he says, no. She says, at least can you take off his skin? There's a way like a fish. You could take off the outer layer of a fish. It's called filleting. She said, can you fillet just his skin off? His beautiful cluster upon him, his beautiful appearance, and maybe we could, like they do, like they in the some animals in the museum, they take the skin of the animal off and they make it into like a fake animal. It's called taxidermy. So they decided, they said okay, and they started tearing off his skin from his face. And as they were pulling off the skin, he didn't cry till they came to the place where his tefillin was, and he let out a cry, ah! And they said, how come you didn't cry till now? He said, this is the place that I had Hashem's name, and I was a Kohen Gadol. I got to wear the tzitz. The Kohen Gadol tzitz says Kodesh Hashem, and now you take that away from me, that skin. It turns out, he asked Hashem, why am I suffering so much? And Hashem told him, there's great punishment for people who don't keep the Torah. And in this case, it meant for those who sold their brother. Is there anyone here that would want to sell their brother or sister? Chas v'sholom. So, chas v'chalil. So it turns out, the angels turned to Hashem and they said, Hashem, such a Kohen Gadol, you showed him the secrets of the heavens. When he flew up, is he going to have to suffer like this? So Hashem says, leave it so that this will be a zchus for all the generations. So sometimes when a tzaddik suffers, not only is it a kapara for the world, somehow it's a zchus for the world. Somehow Hashem says this will be a zchus for the world. I'm not so sure how it works. And right then he cried again, and it shook the throne of Hashem when he cried a second time. And then Hashem says, I'm ready to turn the whole world back to Tohu Vavohu, to make the whole world like it was before I made it. Nothing, if he screams again. So Gabriel came and he said, don't scream a third time, because then Hashem might destroy the world. And besides, you're lucky to be Shema and your friends, because Hashem has great reward for you in Gan Eden in the next world. And right then the angels started saying, Espedim. And by the way, in Rome, the Gemara says, his face is still there. If you go to Rome, they still have a statue or a trophy of Rabbi Shmuel's face. And every 70 years, you know what they used to do? They would make some type of parade, and they would take a guy who represented Esav, strong guy, and they would take somebody who limps, who represented Yaakov, because he got injured in his foot when he fought against the angel, and they put the guy on top of the limping person, and then they take out the face of Yishmael, and they also wear the clothes that Adam Arishon had. Somehow they got a hold of it, and they paraded in the streets to show, see, Esav is on top of Yaakov. Anyway, those were the first 2 tzaddikim that were killed as a kapara for selling Yosef. Who were the next 8? So I have approximately 8 minutes. Let me tell you what happened. The third was Rabbi Akiva.
I know what happened.
This happened approximately 60 years after the Beis HaMikdash, the second Beis HaMikdash was destroyed. The Goyim said no one's allowed to teach Torah or learn Torah. And Rabbi Akiva was teaching Torah. He said, just like a fish can't live without water, I can't live without Torah. I need Torah more than a fish needs water. The next time you see a fish tank and you see water and fish, remember, he needs water and you need water. The Torah is your water. And it turns out Rabbi Akiva had a student named Yoshua Hagarsi, who was his shamish. And every day would come to jail, because they put Rabbi Akiva in jail. Right before they killed him, they put him in jail, because they were about to kill him right away. And then the emperor had to go to war. So he said, when I come back, I'll finish him off. It turns out while he was in the jail, his student brought him water every day to wash netila and drink. Then the guard was very mean. He says, "Oh, I know why you're bringing him so much water. You want to help him dig a hole under the wall of the jailhouse. No way." And he poured half the water out. So now there was only enough for netila, or to drink. So Rabbi Akiva says, "Okay, I'll wash my hands." He said, but his Talmud said, "Rebbe, but you have to drink. If you wash your hands, you're not going to have to drink." He says, "Listen, Chazal say someone who's not careful to wash his hands, Netilas Yadayim, Hashem will uproot him from the world. So it's better that I should wash my hands and not be uprooted from both worlds." He started saying Shema, and the Goyim came and they were starting to rip off his skin. And as they were ripping off his skin, torturing him to death, he was saying Shema. And his students said, "Rebbe, why are you saying Shema?" And he says, "My whole life I've been saying you should love Hashem b'chol nafshecha, even if He takes your life. I was wondering, when am I going to be able to show it? And now, as I'm teaching Torah and they want to kill me, I'll be able to say it." And he said, "Hashem Echad." And right then, his neshama left. And Baskal came out and said, "Lucky you, Rabbi Akiva, you're so pure." And your neshama left with the word Echad. It turns out, Eliyahu Navi came and he told Yeshua Agarsi, his student, "Come, let's go bury Rabbi Akiva." And Hashem made the guards at the jail fall asleep. So they were able to walk in, take out his body, and they brought it to a special cave, which was very beautiful. And the angels said, "Hespedim for him," and he shined just like the sun, like the heavens. And afterwards, he got up in Shemayim Rabbi Akiva, and he was teaching all the tzaddikim and the chassidim in Gan Eden, all the crowns on the Torah, on the different letters, there's crowns. What halachas we learn from those crowns on those psukim. It turns out, Rabbi Yeshua Agarsi saw another bed there in the cave, which we had a beautiful menorah and a beautiful bed in the cave. And he said that's for Rabbi Akiva's wife, who was Tunis Rufus's ex-wife. It turns out that he ended up marrying. She became a Giores. But anyway, and then the cave closed. The fourth one that was killed is a kapara for selling Yosef, was Rabbi Yehuda ben Baba. And he was very great. He did not sleep much. From when he was 18 years old till he was 70, he wouldn't like to sleep much. Not even like the sleep of a horse. He was busy learning Torah. And he never tasted the tam of chet. And not only that, he never made a mistake in halacha. He would always know the halacha of the Shulchan Aruch. And he fasted 26 years. And he was such an honorable, such a good person, he would call his students, "my Rebbe." He would call his Talmud, "my Rebbe." That's how much honor he had for his students. And he was so happy to learn with his friends. And one day, he gave smicha to 5 tanoim. Because he knew that we need smicha, means that you are allowed to be a posek. And the chain of smicha goes from Moshe to Aaron to the Zakanim to Yoshua, all the way down to the generations, that the Torah is passed on, a Masorah from generation to generation. So he gave smicha to Rameir, Rav Shimon ben Yochai, Rabbi Yehuda bar Elai, Yossi ben Chalafta, and Rabbi Elazar ben Shemua. It turns out, when the Goyim heard that some Jews became ordained as rabbis, they wanted to kill him. So he quickly told the students, "Run! I'm going to stand here between these 2 mountains, and I'm not going to let the Romans get through while my 5 students go escape." And while they were running, the Goyim came and they stabbed them with knives, 300. And there was even one of his students, Reuven ben Astrabel, who told him, "Should I die in your place? I'm also elderly. I could switch places with you." He said, "No." And it turns out, he says, "Please, I want to keep Shabbos. Don't kill me." But they cut him up and they threw his body to the dogs. So this was also a kapara for selling Yosef. Wow. Unbelievable. Hashem Yimkom Damam. By the way, if you look in the Kinnis on Tisha B'Av, number 21, the 21st Kinnah is called Arzei Halavanon Adirei HaTorah, which means the cedars of Lebanon, these giant trees, these beautiful Torah scholars. It's referring to these 10. Boys, I want to give $2 to the 2 boys sitting nicest for the conclusion of my shir. I have a few minutes to finish. I want to give this up. Hanania ben Shadyon was learning Torah with a Sefer Torah in his hand, and he was teaching Torah to others. And Hashem said he's so pleasant, and everyone said he's so pleasant. He never cursed his friend. And it turns out when the emperor of Rome said no learning Torah, Hanania ben Shadyon said, "Come," and he started teaching Torah in public. And when they found that, they took him, and they took the Sefer Torah that was in his lap, and they wrapped the Torah around him, and they lit it on fire. So his daughter said, Abba, I can't see you like this. He says, don't worry. The one who's going to demand the respect of the Torah, that he embarrassed the Torah, he's going to demand a punishment for them for embarrassing me. And then they put on his heart the cloths of water, so that this way he shouldn't die so fast. So his children said, Rebbe, what do you see? He said, I see the parchment burning, but the letters are not burning. The letters are floating in the air. It turns out the executioner said, if I make you die faster, will you promise me a reward in Olam Haba? He said yes. And he took away the wet wool from his heart and raised the fire. And as he was burning, the executioner, who was a guy, jumped in. And a baskol came out, a voice, and said that Rabbi Chananya ben Chadion, you're going to have a great chelek in Olam Haba. And also the executioner. So Rebbe started to cry. Rebbe said, look at that, the Rasha, he was a Rasha his whole life. The last minute he does teshuvah, and Hashem says he's going to have Olam Haba. Rebbe cried because he also knew of Rabbi Yochanan, Kohen Gadol, who was a tzaddik 80 years, and in the end he became a Rasha. How he lost his whole life because in the end he became bad. All right, boys, we're almost done. Give me 2 minutes. Rabbi Yeshovev HaSofer, it was a Monday, and he was fasting. He was 90 years old. And his student said, Rebbe, do you want to taste anything? He says, no. My Rebbe, Rabbi Yehuda ben Baba, was fasting when he died. I can fast also. And it turns out the Russia, the emperor, said to kill him when he was saying Shema. When he died, a baskol came out and said, lucky are you, Rabbi Shovev HaSofer, Rabbi Shovev the scribe. You didn't leave anything in the Torah of Moshe that you didn't do. And it turns out, he said, Halavai, my death should be an atonement for the generation. Sometimes Hashem was going to punish the generation, but he took one tzaddik, should be a kapara instead of the generation suffering. They killed him, and they threw his body to the dogs. He wasn't buried, and some say they burned him. Rabbi Lazar ben Dama was killed for wearing tefillin. They said, oh, you're not allowed to wear tefillin. And they killed Rabbi Lazar ben Dama. It was a kapara for Mechiras Yosef. Give me 1 minute. Then Chananya ben Chachinoi was Erev Shabbos, and he when he was 12 years old till he was 95 years old, he used to fast. And they killed him when he was saying Kiddush, and a baskol said, lucky is him that his whole life was Kadosh. Then they took him Chutzpah HaMetorgaman. Now some say Chutzpah HaMetorgaman was the Gilgal of Yosef. And he knew 70 languages, and that's why he was called Targuman, because he was the translator for the Sanhedrin. He was as great as Rabbi Yosef ben Uziel. He was 130 years old, and he was so beautiful and so handsome, he looked like an angel. They grabbed him, and they killed him with his students. It turns out, there was one rabbi, whose name was Elisha ben Avuya, who was a tremendous goyin, but he saw something that made him go off the derech. He saw a swine, a pig, chewing on the tongue of Chutzpah ben Metorgaman. So the Elisha, who was a rabbi, says, what? Is this the reward Hashem gives to tzaddikim? That he lets a hog chew up the rabbi's tongue after he got killed? So he went off the derech and he became like a goy. He lived with goyim, he was crazy, he went off the derech. So it turns out, he made a mistake. He should have known that really the reason why his tongue was punished is because some say he was a kapara for Yosef HaTzadik. And since Yosef spoke Lashon Hara, now his tongue had to be chewed up by the pig. So it turns out that he wanted to say Shema, they didn't let him, and the Caesar started cursing, started making fun of Hashem, that Hashem can't save him. So Chutzpah tore his clothes. I can't hear someone speak negative about Hashem. And it turns out, he says, Hashem's going to punish you and all the Romans. So he killed him, and they threw stones on him, and then they hung him up. It turns out we're up to the last ones. Rabbi Yehuda ben Dama, Rabbi Lazar ben Shamua, how was he killed? It was Yom Kippur, and he was 105 years old. From when he was young to he was old, he never heard people speak bad. He was always guarding his ears not to hear nonsense. He never fought with anyone, and he fasted for 80 years. He was very humble. And he told his students, before he died, I see in Shemayim, Rabbi Kiva and Rabbi Yehuda ben Baba arguing and learning. So he said, who's right? So he says, Rabbi Shmuel is going to decide the halachas like Rabbi Kiva. Rabbi Kiva got the halacha like him because his whole life he worked so hard to know the Torah, and Angels are bringing gold